Whether you're building a new home or adding on, framing up the situation, or putting a roof over your head. If you need to rock it, roll it, or just get on with it, Home Time has a video to help you do it right. Transform your small bathroom into a luxurious master bath, or increase your home's value by updating your old kitchen. Keep your drains draining, your switches switching, and your footing firm. Whether you do it yourself or buy it yourself, Home Time's how-to video guides will help you get the results you want. Will make your next project a success. See your local home improvement retailer for the Home Time video that's right for you.
Well, I just heard on the radio that now there's a 40% chance of rain tonight. So what do you want to do, go ahead or what?
Oh, I definitely think we should. I hate to lose a day. You know, if worse comes to worse, we'll just stick plastic on the roof, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Hi, welcome to Home Time. I'm Suzanne Egley.
And I'm Dean Johnson. In this videotape, we're going to show you how to re-roof a house, starting with tearing off the old shingles, getting everything ready, and then putting on the new shingles.
Now, we're dealing with a re-roofing situation here, but almost all the techniques we're going to demonstrate will work when you're installing roofing on a new house, too. You're going to put that up by the deck, or?
Yeah, I'll throw it up by the deck back
Okay.
here.
Home Time is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The national PBS series Home Time is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right. At Home Time, we believe the best way to get the job done is to use the finest tools.
And this Chevy full-size pickup is one of our favorites. Equipped with an optional Vortec 5700 V8 engine, it generates 255 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque to power you through the toughest jobs.
And with the optional third door, you've got lots of room for all your other tools.
And friends to help you use them.
At home or on the job site.
For work or play,
It's no wonder we at Home Time count on Chevy full-size pickups.
the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Now, it's an unpleasant fact of life that roofs have to be replaced every once in a while. The average asphalt shingle roof will last about 20 or 30 years. So unless you're only buying brand new houses, the chances are you're going to have to replace a roof sooner or later.
And when you do, you'll probably find that sticking $3,000 or $4,000 into your roof is probably one of the least satisfying things you can do on your home. Now, usually when you do a home improvement project like redoing a bathroom or a kitchen, or even adding a deck, that's something you enjoy. Because when you're re-roofing your house, about the only time you enjoy that is when you go outside and look up. Or I suppose when it doesn't grip on you anymore.
Now, one way to make the job less costly and more satisfying is to do the work yourself. But we want you to know exactly what you're getting into if you do your own roofing. Roofing is not for everybody. It is a hard job. You have to be safety conscious, and if you're putting on a dark-colored roof in the middle of the summer, boy, the heat can get pretty miserable.
Basically what we want to do is show you what this job involves so you can decide whether or not you actually want to do the work yourself. And even if you decide to hire it out, you'll have a much better idea of what the job entails. Tearing off an old roof, it's not a job that takes a lot of special skill. Your tool selection, well, that's a matter of personal preference. Some people like to use a square-nosed spade, but we prefer pitchforks. Well, basically, you just try to get them under the shingle and pry them up. And it's probably best to work from the top down.
Some people will tell you to just pound down any roofing nails that are still sticking out of the decking. We think it's a much better idea to pull them out. It just means there's less chance that they'll work themselves up again over time.
There's metal flashing all over the roof, around vents and chimneys in the valleys, and when you're doing a tear-off, not much of this can be saved. Or maybe some flashing around chimneys.
but we'll go into a lot of detail on flashing later on in the program. So you know it's starting to rain a little bit here.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I guess we better quit.
Yeah.
Get our tarps up.
Okay, well, let me get these tools out of here.
Okay.
Where are the tarps? Down the garage?
Yeah, they are. I'm glad we got those.
Well, we ended up getting about 3 inches of rain during that storm the other day. Then it drizzled all day yesterday, so we're back at it today. Fortunately, Suzanne has jury duty, so I'll get done what I can. You can see I have the tarp rolled up here in case it starts to rain again. I can just roll that down. One thing you should realize, a good roofer would never get themselves in this situation to begin with. They would either delay the tear-off or only tear off as much as they could cover with building felt before it started to rain. A really good roofer should be able to tear off and cover a roof like this in a day, or at least the back of the roof. For us, it's probably going to take 3 days. Now, depending on the slope of your roof, you'll probably want to use these roof jacks. The old shingles give you pretty good traction, but once you get down to the bare deck, or even this roofing felt, it can be pretty slippery. These will give you a lot better traction. But you put them in with a couple of nails, and if you can, you try to drive the nails into the rafters, not just into the plywood decking. Well, this allows us to slide a 2x6 in between the two jacks. It gives us a nice spot here to stand on. Now, these should be used along all the eaves, and you should always be working with them whenever you're up on the roof. And this includes demolition, which can get to be a little bit of a problem because all your debris ends up collecting here, and of course you have to remove them to take off the last few shingles, but you can do that on the ladder. But they're a real good precaution in case you do slide off the roof. You have something here to grab onto before you take the big tumble. Well, besides making repairs to the roof sheathing, you also want to make any repairs to the wood along the eaves and rakes. In fact, here above the deck, we did have a piece of rotted fascia board. So, I got this piece of finger-jointed redwood to replace it, and I'm priming it on the back before I put it up. Now, because it's redwood, and because it's going to have paint on all sides, I'm pretty sure we're not going to have to worry about rot again. So, what have we got here? Well, we want this new fascia board to be exactly the right width. We want the top of the board to line up directly under the bottom of the shingles, like so. And for our soffit material here, we're using exterior grade 3/8 inch plywood.
Hi there, how's it going?
Oh, not too bad. I got the tear off done. I got the soffit up here. What, they didn't need you?
Well, as soon as they heard my sister and brother-in-law were lawyers, I was out of there.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I guess I can't see. I'm disappointed. Here, now that you're here, can you grab the other?
Sure.
Watch out, it's kind of tacky.
Oh, yeah, it is.
So,
okay.
I have to grab this board right here. Yeah, if you could just hold that end up there. Okay. Well, the fit down here looks all right.
Okay, yeah. Now that Dean has repaired our rotted soffit and fascia, we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So we're putting up this metal flashing called a drip edge. Now, a lot of roofing contractors will skip this part, but we're not going to because it's a pretty easy thing to do, and it can really make a difference down the road. Now, what we're using is aluminum, but it is available in galvanized and copper. Now, the point of this drip edge is to allow the water to drip out over the edge of the house, past the fascia. And you just push it right up against the edge of the fascia.
It'll also help support that last little bit of shingle that hangs over the edge and keep that from drooping over time. And we'll support it using roofing nails about every 8 or 10 inches or so. Well, living in the north part of the country, we sometimes have problems with ice dams along the eaves. Now, we try to prevent that with good attic ventilation.
We also want to install some protection. In fact, in our area, it's required by code. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do this, but the most surefire way is to use this special ice dam protection. This stuff is thick and kind of soft. It's got an adhesive on the back that's covered with paper. You peel that back and then set it in place.
Okay, put this up here underneath.
Okay, you got the paper?
There we go. Got it. Okay, you tell me when you're in position there.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that good? Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'll roll out just a little bit. You make
Okay.
sure it stands straight there, okay? Is that good?
Yep.
You right in the bottom?
Yep, we're just fine.
Okay. Now the trick is to just pull the paper back and slowly bring the roll out. Okay?
Yep.
Still good?
Yeah, it's just fine. Go ahead.
Oh, here, let me just cut off some of this extra paper.
Now you want to make sure that this is flush against the drip edge and against the rake. And this stuff really seals up the edge of the roof, especially against the nails that we're going to use on our shingles. So even if we do end up with an ice dam, the sheathing in the house will be protected. Now the code says this ice dam protection needs to be 24 inches above the exterior wall line. So since this stuff is 3 feet wide and our eave is only 6 inches wide, one roll will be enough.
Well, you can also use this stuff as sort of an insurance policy on some of the trickier areas. We're using it here in the valleys where the two roofs meet. Now, this isn't required by code like it is along the eaves.
Yeah, this is just a precaution. This material is not cheap. A 33-foot roll of this costs about $40, so it's not something you want to go crazy with. So if you're doing the job yourself, you want to spend a little extra on insurance now instead of spending a lot later on roof repairs.
Okay, all right, let me get my 6-inch overlap here.
Is that good?
Get that all lined up. That should do it right there like that.
Okay, I've got the crease in the valley up here.
Okay, this looks pretty good here.
Go ahead, then.
Yeah, why don't we lay it down? Okay, you got that? Now we're also applying this on this lower pitched area of the roof right in here. This ends up usually accumulating a lot of snow and ice from the runoff from these two roofs. Again, it's just to be extra careful.
In fact, we talked to a roofing contractor, and he said if he was going to do this section of the roof, he wouldn't use shingles. He'd use a rubber membrane roof. Well, that's not exactly a do-it-yourself project, so we think what we're doing will work out just fine.
Well, you like some overlap wherever two pieces of this ice barrier meet. About 6 inches of overlap on the horizontal and on the vertical seams. All right, is there anything that's going to keep us from putting felt on this thing now?
Boy, I hope not. It'd be nice to see if we can get all the felt up before the end of the day.
Oh, I agree with you there. So how many rolls do you think we ought to take up there?
Oh, I think 2 to start with, don't you?
Yeah, that's probably plenty.
So is this the stuff that's reinforced with the fiberglass?
Yeah. Now, this stuff gets called a lot of different names. Some people call it tar paper, which is really fairly accurate since it's basically thick paper soaked with asphalt to make it waterproof.
It's also called builder's felt or roofing felt, and that's a term that's left over from when this stuff was made out of rags. Okay, I'm on my spot.
Okay, I'm all set here. Okay, now normally our first piece of roofing felt would go right in the valley here, but we already have our ice shield down, so we don't have to worry about that. Now we snapped a chalk line here. That's where the bottom of the first roll of roofing felt will go. There you go.
Yep.
And that's designed to end up perfectly parallel with the bottom of our roof. And we're overlapping it over the shield by about 2 inches.
We're just putting it down right over the old felt. This old felt was held in place with roofing nails, but we're going to be doing something a little bit easier than that, using a hammer tacker. You just want to put a few staples in every few inches. Now this works best if one person unrolls and one person staples. You just want to make sure that the unroller doesn't get too far ahead of the stapler. Okay.
And whenever you run into a valley, we just do a rough cut, and then we go back and trim the tar paper so it lands right in the middle of the valley. Okay, that looks good right there. If If we didn't have an ice barrier under here, we'd leave the felt running a couple of feet long.
Okay. Now you start the next row up over at the rake. It overlaps by 2 inches. There's a little mark there to keep it in line. Is that okay?
That's good. Go ahead.
Okay, how's that?
Pretty good right there.
The last row on this side flops over the ridge. This is kind of important because we don't want to have a seam along the middle here.
All right, well, I think I'll go ahead and cut out the felt here along the rake.
Okay.
See, why don't you show me that chalk so I can mark this vent before we fall through it?
Okay, here we go.
Thanks. Okay, let me line this one up. Right
Okay.
there?
Yep.
When you install your ice and water barrier, let it run a little long and then trim off the excess. You want it flush with the rake and the drip edge. I guess we can get up some roof jacks and install some more felt, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you're changing locations on the roof, you got to keep moving your ladders and your safety equipment. So you tend to get more than one step done in one area before you move on. Now on this side of the house, we're doing the same thing we did on the middle section. We've already put in our drip edge and our ice and water barrier. Now we're going to start on our roofing felt. Before we were working off those 2 step ladders over by the deck. Now we've got these ladder jacks hooked into our extension ladders with this special plank across them. It gives us a nice platform to work from. Those ladder jacks you can get at a rental store. Heads up, Dean.
All right. And now a few things about ladders. I mean, a lot of this is common sense, but I'm going to go through it anyway. Always keep a ladder on a solid level surface. Even if you have to dig out underneath one of these feet to keep it level, you should do it. Another thing, if the ladder is fully extended, let's say 20 feet, the distance between the house and the ladder should be a quarter of that distance. So let's say it's up 20 feet. This should be a 5-foot distance. Always face the ladder when you go up. Keep one hand on the ladder at all times and never carry anything that's too heavy that might make you lose your balance.
Now just as a precaution, we're nailing in these strips of lath to prevent the wind from lifting up the felt. But remember, every nail puts another hole in the felt, so you want to keep them to a minimum.
There's just a couple more prep things we want to do on the back here before we move over to the front. One is install this drip edge here along the rakes, and of course get flashing in our valleys. Along the eave here, the drip edge goes underneath the roofing felt. Whereas along the rake, it goes right on top. Now because the rake is long enough, we'll be using 2 pieces of drip edge. And like any other type of roofing material, we start at the bottom and work our way up, overlapping the material as we go. Now we add our second piece on. We overlap it a couple inches, like that, and then nail it in.
Well, you gonna be able to help me with this in a sec?
Yeah, why don't you slide it on down here?
Okay. There's a couple different ways that you can shingle your valleys. And we're going with a style that's called open valley. It's a pretty foolproof way for do-it-yourselfers. For an open valley, you need to put in this metal flashing.
Now, this is called W-shaped valley flashing. It's made out of galvanized steel, and it's really pretty standard issue at most building centers. Now, the reason it has this ridge in the middle is to keep water from flowing down one side of the roof and right up the other side and getting underneath the shingles and felt. Set that in place. Looks pretty good. How's it looking up there?
Just fine.
Okay. Well, I cut the bottom here so it matches the edge of the roof. I can go ahead and start nailing it down. The nails go in a little bit from the edge, and we'll put them about every foot or so. Our valleys in the back here are longer than 10 feet, so we had to run a few pieces of valley flashing. Of course, we installed the lower ones first. Then I ran a couple of beads of roof cement here where the overlap will take place. And one thing I got to tell you, this roof cement is some real gooey stuff. but all you have to do is look at it, and it's all over your hands and pants and stuff. So it's a good idea to work with it in these little caulking tubes.
You all set there?
Yeah, grab that for you. If you can take the top.
Yeah.
All right, Suzanne, right there.
Okay. At the top here, we've got these two valleys converging on each other. Now, we've already flattened out the lower one, snipped it along here. That's what we're doing on this upper one. We'll just cut along here and then bend it down.
Well, this isn't real pretty, but it definitely will get the job done. And remember, most of this area here will be covered with shingles. Well, because we have a situation here where we have a steeper roof intersecting a flatter roof, there's going to be much more of a chance for water to run off the steep roof, jump our little ridge here, and then get up underneath the shingles on the flatter roof. So that's why we've installed some more ice and water barrier here. It's just a little additional insurance.
It sure is a relief to get this done and not have to worry about that tarp tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Well, with the rain and everything, it has taken us 3 days to do the tear off back here and to get the felt up. Do you think it's going to be okay to leave this alone for a couple of days while we work on the front?
I think so.
It'd be nice to get the whole tear off done and then start shingling.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, once you get your 15-pound felt up, which is what most people use, you can leave it exposed for a few days without a problem. It may get a little wrinkled if it starts to rain, but again, it's nothing you have to worry about. In fact, this brand has a little bit of fiberglass woven into it to keep that from happening. Well, we're back in the tear-off mode again. Actually, this is the last section of the roof we'll be tearing off. We'll leave the shingles on top of the garage. Since there's only one layer of shingles, we'll put the new shingles on top of the old. But over here, there's 2 layers of shingles, which is maxed by code, so these got to come off.
But even if there was only one layer, I think we do a tear off anyway because these shingles have just deteriorated beyond the point where they would make a good base for a shingle over.
Re-roofing your house can be a real messy proposition for your shrubs and grass, especially during the tear-off period like this. So depending on how much you care about those areas in your home, you may want to prop up some old plywood or paneling like this against the building and then lay out some drop cloths to catch all the nails and smaller debris that will get caught up in the grass.
The pitch on this roof is 10-12, which means it rises 10 inches for every horizontal 12 inches. That means it's almost a 45-degree angle. Pretty steep to walk on without help, which is why we've got these roof jacks scattered about. Now, if you're nervous about falling off a roof that's this steep, you could wear a safety belt and attach it to something solid up at the top of the roof. In fact, that's an OSHA regulation for professional roofers. When they're working on a roof where the eave is more than 16 feet off the ground, they have to wear a safety belt or else put a platform around the edge of the house to land on if they fall.
Another thing about doing a tear-off, you have to figure out what to do with all the debris. One good option is to rent a dumpster, park that out in front, load everything in there. We thought about doing that. Fortunately, our driveway here is real thin. The road isn't much wider, so we really didn't have a good spot to park it. So we thought it'd be just a lot easier to haul it away ourselves. This roofing material does get to be fairly heavy, so make sure you don't overload your vehicle. We'll probably end up doing about 5 or 6 trips.
Okay, it's 47 5/8 on the bottom. Let's see, we've got 31 1/2 on the top.
31 1/2, okay.
Yep. Well, we've been pretty lucky so far about the condition of our sheathing underneath our shingles, but last night when we were finishing the tear-off up front here, we came across a rotten spot right above that little bay window. You know, it's not surprising because this is kind of a weird little piece of roofing here. We do need to repair this before we put any new roofing on. So we've torn out this spot. We're just going to patch it with 3/4 inch plywood. Okay, you got it there?
Here you go. Try this out.
perfect. Do you have any 8 pennies?
Yeah. There you go.
Thanks. Well, we'd hire this out, it would have cost some extra money.
Oh yeah, we saved a few bucks on that one.
Yeah. Now, if you're working with a roofing contractor, decking repairs like this will cost extra, above and beyond the original bid. It should be covered with something that's called a T&M clause. That stands for time and materials. But you know, there's no way to predict what kind of repairs you're going to need. You just kind of have to be prepared.
Yeah, these are really some nice gutters. They're called high-back gutters, and we haven't seen them at too many building supply centers, but mainly professional contractors use them. What's nice about these is they have this flange that goes up along the decking. Once the roofing's on, there's no way the water can go anywhere but in the gutter. It's kind of like a drip edge and a gutter all in one.
Well, our shingles have been here for a while. In fact, they were delivered the first day we started the tear-off.
Well, what we've been showing you on the roof so far is real common to most roofs. But here's where things start changing a little bit, depending on the type of roofing material you're using. We're going to go with one of the most common types of roofing materials available, 3-tab asphalt shingles. So next thing on the docket, installation techniques. Our roof is 24 squares, which means that the surface area is 2,400 square feet. And whenever you're doing roofing, you always want to talk in terms of squares. And 1 square is 100 square feet.
So contractors figure out their bids in terms of square, and materials are sold that way too. So for instance, 1 roll of the ice barrier covers 1 square, a roll of that 15-pound felt will cover 4 squares, and 3 bundles of the shingles cover approximately 100 square feet, or 1 square.
Well, there are a couple of different ways to figure out how much roofing material you'll actually need. Probably one of the simplest and most straightforward is to get up and measure everything. Well, for instance, measure the rake and measure the eave, multiply those together, then add all those up for your total square footage. Of course, the multiplying and adding up is the easy part of that process. The hard part is actually getting up there and doing the measuring. And then every now and again, you'll run into some fairly odd-shaped areas like we have in the back. Then it gets a little bit more complicated.
Now, there is a way to measure from the ground. You measure the horizontal area of the roof. So for this front section, you'd measure along the eave, and then you'd measure back this way horizontally to the peak of the roof and multiply that to get the area. So you multiply that figure by a factor that's been determined by the pitch of the roof. Now this roof has a 10-12 pitch, and I believe the factor for that is 1.3 something. Anyway, you measure the different sections of your roof this way. Now the advantage of this type of calculation is that you don't have to get up on the roof. You can do this from a blueprint.
Okay, now the first shingles we apply are for the starter. Now you can get a special material for the starter, but what most people will do is take a regular shingle and cut off the tabs. The tabs are the bottom sections of the shingle. And it's easiest to cut from the back of the shingle, since the granules can make your knife go just a little bit crooked. This works much easier. Okay, I'm on the mark here.
Okay.
And I got it there.
Okay.
All right?
Yep. One thing that makes a roofing job look nice is if all the rows of shingles are straight and square. Now, professional roofing contractor will probably only need 1 or 2 snapped lines in order to stay on track, but for do-it-yourselfers, it doesn't hurt to put in a few more.
Our bottom horizontal line running right along here is for the top of our starter course. And whenever possible, you want to start on a gable end. And you always want to start at the bottom. If I can have the square there, thanks. Now the first thing we do is cut a little bit off the starter course here so the joint in the starter course doesn't line up with the joint in the first full course of shingles. We've decided to run the shingles a 1/4 inch past the rake and 3/8 inch past the eave. That should do it. Once it's positioned, we nail it in place. And you notice that I position the shingles so these bits of adhesive are along the bottom.
After you've got the shorter piece in, you begin with the full-width starter shingles. Now, the purpose of these starter strips is so that there's a double layer of shingles over the entire roof, including along the eave here. Okay. We'll just continue with this starter strip until we get to that funny little roof part over the bay window.
All right, well, we've done a little measuring here and figured out our math, and as it turns out, if we place our first shingle right up against the edge of our starter course, by the time we get over to the other gable end, there'll be just a little sliver hanging over, which won't look so good. So instead, we'll cut off 1 inch on the first shingle. By the time we get over to the other side, it'll be looking a lot better. So once we determine that, then we snapped our vertical chalk lines, and these chalk lines we'll use to align the first shingle in each one of our rows as we go up.
Okay, yeah. Now this is the one that we've taken 1 inch off of the left side. So if we've done everything right, when I put this up against the right chalk line, it should run over about 1/4 inch. Well, that feels good to me, but why don't you go ahead and check it too. Now it pays to be careful on these first few shingles because they're going to set the pattern for this whole front section.
I think that looks good. Well, normally we place the nail about 5/8 of an inch up from the cutout, but over here where we cut off the shingle, we'll place it about 2 inches in from the edge.
Now we're going to put down the first shingle for the second course right away, and you're going to start seeing what's called a 6-inch offset. Now basically you have to stagger your shingles because you don't want the cutouts to be lined up right over each other row after row. Since the cutouts are 12 inches wide, if you offset them by 6 inches, then the cutout above will land right in between the 2 cutouts on the row below it. You've got all this that's left over, but Dean's going to trim that off for me. Got that done?
There you go, 7 inches off.
Great, thanks.
Now because we took 1 inch off the first course, we'll end up taking 7 inches off the second course. Okay, so 1 inch off this one then, right?
Right. Now this second vertical chalk line is 6 inches to the left of this first one. I'll be using it to help me align this course. It'll help me with the side to side, but for the vertical alignment, just make sure that the bottom of the shingle is right at the top of the cutout of the row below it. Okay, this looks like it's ready to nail.
Here's the next one.
Okay.
I'll start putting in full shingles along the bottom row.
Oh yeah, go ahead. We'll just continue this on up until I end up with a 5-inch piece of shingle. That'll be at the 6th course, and with the 7th course, we'll be ready to start with a full shingle again.
A couple things about nails. Roofing nails are all galvanized so they don't rust. And they're usually about an inch long. The one on the edges here going about an inch. And then all the nails go directly underneath this adhesive strip. The adhesive is here to glue down the tabs. What will happen over the next few days is the adhesive here will get a little tacky as the shingles warm up. And then over time it will bond with the tabs here so they won't lift up during a storm. I'm using a roofing hatchet instead of a regular hammer. Now for asphalt shingles you can use a regular hammer, but a roofing hatchet does have some real advantages. Well, for instance, it has this little nut that can be placed in one of these holes here to measure the distance between the rows. And the head is slightly convex, so it sinks the nail just a little bit below the surface.
Now that we're up to the 4th course, the first shingle's getting kind of skimpy. This one's 17 inches, so when you try and position it, it's just a little short. So what I'm going to do is put in the first full shingle that goes right next to it. It's easy to position that one using the row before, and then this little piece will go right in.
You pretty well have the pattern laid out there, right?
Yeah, it's going
Okay.
good.
I think I'll grab the compressor and nail it, then we can really start moving, all right?
Okay, and I'll just start these next 2 courses.
Okay, all right. Well, most professional roofers will use a compressor and a nailer like this for roofing nails. Now, if you're not a professional roofer, you can borrow or rent one of these, or you might even want to think about buying one if you do a lot of stuff around the house. A good gun will have a guard on the bottom. Now, the gun won't fire unless this guard is compressed. Still a good idea, though, not to plug it in when you're loading it. Now, the nails come in a roll, and they have a corrosion-resistant coating on them to keep from rusting. Kind of roll that guy out like so. And be sure to wear safety glasses whenever you're operating one of these, and read any instructional information that comes along with the unit, because it'll make some real good points, like adjusting the pressure for the appropriate gun that you're using. There you go.
Okay? Yep.
Hold this side down here.
that we are laying in these shingles, we're working almost all the way across the bottom on the first 5 or 6 rows, and we're only working up as far as we can reach from this ladder plank. You suppose it's okay to leave that and shingle that later?
You know, we could putz around that little area right there all day long. I think we're
You're
better
right.
off. Let's just
You're right.
start
I'll quit
here
talking
and
about it.
get something accomplished.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put these
Okay.
roof jacks in.
All right, well, we're going to install roof jacks across the entire roof next here, and we'll lay them right on top of the shingles we've already laid.
To do this right, so you don't leave a nail hole in the roof when you pull out the jack, you just put it in the top part of the shingle.
Okay, I've got it there.
Okay, it's 10 feet, 6.5 inches.
All right, well, we're only off a quarter. That's not too bad. Well, one thing you have to watch as you're coming up the roof is to keep your top row of shingles running parallel to the peak, for whatever reason, be it a smaller bundle of shingles, or if you're just not being real careful about how you lay them out. The top row may start to snake up and down across the roof. So to just double check this, measure down from the peak to the top row, and if you see any adjustments that have to be made, just make those over the next upcoming rows.
Yeah, but it's the side-to-side alignment that really matters. If these cutouts aren't lined up going up the roof, boy, that really sticks out. So some people will snap an additional vertical chalk line further down the roof, or else you can get down to the bottom and sight up to the top and make sure that your cutouts are straight that way.
See, I'm gonna run down and grab a couple more bundles, all right?
Okay, I'll get rid of these roof jacks.
All right. Well, a bundle of these shingles weighs about 70 or 80 pounds, so it's a lot of work carrying them up and down. If you arrange it ahead of time, you possibly can have these delivered to the top of the roof with a crane. Otherwise, like us, you'll end up carrying them up yourself.
Boy, aren't you getting tired doing that?
Oh, a little bit.
Well, I don't think we should push it. We don't want to start getting overtired and then get sloppy. Maybe we should just do a couple more courses and then call it quits for the day.
Okay, I guess I'd be up for that.
Yeah. Now, a brick chimney is probably the most complicated thing to roof around. And what makes it so tough is that you have to allow for the fact that the chimney may move slightly in relationship to the roof. And even a slight movement can lead to a gap in the roofing, which in turn can lead to a leak.
So a good chimney will have two types of flashing. There's the base flashing that goes directly on the roof, and then the counter or cap flashing that gets attached to the chimney that overlaps the base flashing. Well, the advantage of overlapping flashing is that it gives the joint a little bit of flexibility. If the house moves in relation to the chimney, it doesn't crack the joint. Instead, the two types of flashing shift independently of each other.
We're pretty lucky here that our old flashing's in pretty good shape, so we're able to leave some of it and reuse it. And what we want to do is bring our shingles up to the chimney on the bottom and up on the sides, overlap them with the flashing, making sure that whichever one is farther up is the one that's on top. So like this last full row of shingles under the chimney goes under that first piece of flashing, and this next little piece of shingle goes over the first piece of flashing and under the next piece. Okay, there.
Now on a chimney, it's nice to squirt a little roof cement to help seal the joint. And you just need to make sure that the nails always go where they'll be covered up with the next layer, whether it's flashing or shingles.
Now on the roof above the chimney, you usually like to put in a saddle, or it's sometimes called a cricket. Now a saddle is just a little piece of roof that deflects the water down on either side of the chimney so it doesn't pool up here behind. Now in this particular chimney, there's not a whole lot of roof here, so we're not going to get a big water problem. So we're just putting in this little piece of customized sheet metal, which will fit right around the top. I don't think we'll be able to fit another shingle in here.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. We'll just go with the ridge shingles then.
Yeah.
So we should probably cut the top of this thing off.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Do you have a hook blade?
I think I do.
Okay.
Try that out. You on the mark down there?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna snap it.
Now, getting the rest of the front done here was pretty straightforward. We have left the ridge for now. We'll finish up the other side and then put those last shingles in. Now, Dean is trimming the right-hand side to get a clean edge. You remember over on the left-hand side, we left a 1/4 of an inch overhang off the drip edge. On this side, we just let it run long. He's using a hook knife along the chalk line to get a real clean edge.
With everything done here in front, we're taking out the rest of our roof jacks. Now you just tap these up a little bit on the bottom and they slide right out. Now we don't want to pull out the nails. You just lift up the tab. Now you got to be careful not to break the shingle, especially if it's cold, and pound down the nails. The shingle flaps down, covers the heads.
Now with the front done, you can see that we've actually got a color blend. It's not a totally uniform color. You won't notice this if you're looking at individual shingles, but spread out over a bigger area, it gives the roof a little extra, I don't know, a texture, kind of the same sort of feel you might get with a natural roofing material like wood or slate. Now you'll see some roofs that have perfectly even color and others that have a lot of color variety. So you just have to decide what you think is going to look best on your house, in your neighborhood.
Another thing you have to decide is how tough a roof you want. And a good way to tell is with a guarantee. Shingles will have guarantees of 20, 25, and 30 years. And of course this has to do with how thick the shingle is, and of course how much it costs. At most home center and hardware stores, you'll typically find a 20 to 25-year guarantee shingle. Now, the shingles we have here are 30-year guarantee, but they're typically a contractor item, although home centers can special order them. Now, one other thing to remember here is that a lighter shingle will last longer than a darker shingle, even with the same guarantee.
Another thing, don't be confused by the terms asphalt and fiberglass. All shingles are made up of 3 basic parts. They have asphalt for waterproofing, granules on the surface for color and protection, and a base layer of either organic or fiberglass. Now, really, the fiberglass shingles have replaced the organic ones in most of the country.
Well, it's taken us a couple days to get the front done here. Back's a little bit more complicated. So we figure at least a couple more days back here.
Yeah, I think so. Our 2 additions are pretty straightforward. In fact, we've already finished those 2 over there. Now we're starting on this one. We're going to show you a little different technique on this one.
On the back here, we're using a method for laying up the shingles that 99% of professional roofers do. It's called racking. Now, instead of doing what we did up front, which was basically stepping back the first 6 rows of shingles and then working across the entire roof, here we're going up vertically. To do this, they alternate how the shingles are offset, back and forth like this, from row to row. And they leave out a nail on the side of the shingle. So the next step we'll do is bring in our next shingle, line that up in the row below by lifting up this tab, and then we'll place a nail on this shingle and nail down the top nail right there.
The advantage of doing it this way is that you're moving side to side a lot less, so you don't have to put the planks and the jacks all the way across the roof.
Well, the disadvantage is you can sometimes see this pattern in the roof. Sometimes the joint between the shingles creates a cutout that's a tiny bit different from the rest of the cutouts. And when these are lined up directly above each other, row after row, it can really stand out. The way we did it up front, the joints were staggered much further apart.
Now, another disadvantage is that you can get a slight variation in color from bundle to bundle, in which case you'd have these large streaks of color coming up the roof in bands. Another thing is there might be a chance that you forget the nails that you have to leave out. Now, over on this side, we've already brought the sides up to the ridge. We're ready for the ridge shingles. Now, you can buy special shingles made for a ridge, but nobody does that. You can just cut them out of regular shingles. You cut from the cutout to the top of the shingle, and you taper it so that the top is a little narrower than the bottom. It's a good idea to snap a chalk line to help line up the ridge shingles. I've put one in at that end. I'll go ahead and position this one down at this end. Hey, Dean, could you help me with this, please?
Sure.
You want the ridge shingle centered as evenly as possible right over the ridge. I'm just going to line it here. Okay. Right, now you can see here how we've had our shingles run up this side and they flop over. That way, by the time we finish putting up all our ridge shingles, we'll have 2 layers, which will be good.
Okay, you got it there?
Yep. The way you position these ridge shingles is to line one side up with the chalk line. Then to get your 5-inch exposure, take the next shingle and place it right where that tapered section begins, where your cutout would have been. You want to put your nail just below the adhesive strip. Oh, you do need to use a longer nail because you're going through just a little bit more roofing.
Well, we left the last couple shingles off our ridge here so that we can weave those into the shingles coming up on the main roof once we go about roofing this. Well, the next thing we want to do is cut off the excess here in the valley. We'll measure over 2 inches from the center of the valley for a total gap up here on the top of 4 inches.
You want the gap to get wider as you move down the valley. It should get 1/8 of an inch wider for every foot that the valley is long. That makes our gap down here 7 inches wider, 3.5 inches on either side of the center of the valley.
Yep.
Thanks.
The hotter the shingles get, the tougher it is to cut them. They're getting pretty warm today. It makes them a little bit softer. Actually, they're a lot easier to cut if they're cooler and stiffer and aren't all stuck together.
Well, you know, Dee, we may be doing more damage than good. Look at that. I think the shingles were getting so hot that when we step on them, we're leaving little marks.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of rough spots here. Well, you want to knock off until first thing in the morning?
Yeah, maybe 6:30 or 7, you think?
Okay, that's probably not a bad idea. Actually, a lot of professional roofing contractors will start at 6 in the morning, work till about noon, and then knock off, work a couple hours at night just to avoid all the heat.
Okay, it's on the nail.
All right. I'll go ahead and snap it down here.
Ready?
All right. Pull it off there.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks.
Now that we're ready for the main part of the roof here, we've got kind of a tricky situation. The lower part of the main roof begins in 3 different sections. This part over here, and then this flatter section here, and then the part that's over by the chimney. Now, if we began shingling at the bottom of each one of these sections, when they got up here to the common area, they wouldn't line up right. So what we've done is started over on one side, worked up, then over, then we've snapped some chalk lines, and we're going to do some measuring on this section so that we can start from the bottom and have it line up right here. Now these 2 lines are going to give us the side-to-side alignment for the cutouts. We just square off of the bottom of this shingle and make sure our lines are 6 inches apart.
We have to determine where to start our first row. Now, because our shingles have an exposure of 5 inches, if we measure down from the row up there and pick a number that's divisible by 5, like 160 right here, we know we can go from this point and end up with a 5-inch exposure with a row of shingles right underneath our last row we laid up there. Okay, I'm all set. If you can grab me a shingle and a framing square there.
Okay. So what'd you come up with?
160 inches.
Okay, let's see. That means you should line it up on the right, left. Be on the left-hand side.
Left, all right.
What I was just figuring is which one of the 2 chalk lines we should line the cutout of our first row up with. Now, I already know that the bottom row that's already in up there, the cutout lines up on the left-hand side. So 5 inches down will be on the right, and then 10 inches on the left, 15 on the right, 10 inches on, or 20 inches on the left, and so on until you get to 160.
Okay, this is all set. If you want to throw a couple nails in, I'll hold it here for you. Well, we're installing the shingles here in the back basically the same way we did out front, where we're kind of stepping them back as we go. But we're also letting the shingles run out past the valleys. Now this shingle here works out fine, but every now and again you're going to run into a shingle that comes up a little short, and you don't want to try to splice in just a little tiny piece like that. So it works a lot better is to cut off the end of this shingle, move it over here, and you have a little bit bigger piece to work with. Or you could take a smaller piece like this one, lay that in, and then take the full shingle and run it past the valley, whichever you think works the best.
Now you're probably going to have some plumbing vents that are sticking out of your roof like this one. And there's some special steps you need to take to shingle around these. Now, first of all, I've run these shingles up as close as I can to the pipe, even cutting some to fit around it. Then I put this metal boot right over the pipe. This goes over the shingles that are below and to the sides of the vent. Okay, then we just nail this in around the edges. Now this next row of shingles will go above the plumbing boot. I've already cut out this row here so it'll fit right on the top.
In position there?
Yep.
We lined up?
Mm-hmm.
Now these boots come sized in various standard vent sizes. It has a little top here that slides right over the base. There's this metal that we just bend over on the top here. It's just a real soft lead. And we have a clamp over here on the side. We tighten down, just hold everything good and tight.
Now, anytime you've got exposed nails, you should cover those with a little dab of exterior caulk.
As we've been moving up the roof here, we've been taking measurements every now and again to make sure that the shingles we're laying down are still running parallel to the last row we're going to tie into here. We've also been checking to make sure that we're maintaining an average 5-inch exposure. And to be perfectly honest with you, we have had to make a few minor adjustments.
Now that we're up to the area where we've already shingled, we're doing something that's called back shingling. And what that means is that you put new shingles underneath the ones that are already installed. When you back shingle, you have to put the nails on the top part of the upper shingle. That's so that you can slip the new shingle underneath. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Right like that.
Yeah, then you nail in the new shingle first. Then you go back and replace the nails that you'd left out.
Now, back shingling like this isn't exactly the ideal way to go. It's always best to work from the bottom up. But sometimes it is necessary. Let's go. We also have to do a little back shingling at the bottom of this flatter area. This is because we started a couple rows up from the bottom, just so we'd be working with a bigger shingle to establish our pattern up the roof. Now, these smaller pieces we're putting in now would be pretty tough to set our alignment from.
Here you go.
Okay, thanks. Well, there's a few vents here along the ridge to help move cool air up underneath the shingles. Now, we'll use the holes here that are in place. We'll put on some new vents. So what I've done is run shingles up underneath the hole and up along the sides, and I'll set the vent right on top of these shingles. I've cut the shingles here to fit around the top of the vent. Now, many times you'll see the shingles just barely covering the edge of the flange here, but we like sticking them way underneath here, as you can see. Sometimes you'll want to put in some extra roof vents. When you cut out holes for these, make sure you do it so that the hole will fall between the framing rafters underneath. Also, cut so that the top of the hole runs across the bottom of a course of shingles. You can make the main cuts with a circular saw, but you'll have to finish each cut off in the corners with a reciprocating saw or a hand saw. For the shingles above the vent and on the sides of it, you'll have to slip the flange under the shingles. So you're going to have to remove some of the nails that hold these shingles down. To do this, lift up the shingles and slip a pry bar underneath. once you've got a clear path for the vent, set it in place and nail it down. Along the bottom, you nail directly through the flange. Along the sides and top, you'll need to lift up the shingles and drive nails in underneath them. Now, on a warmer day, I might be able to bend the shingles enough to lift them clear of the top of the vent. But today they're cold and I'll probably break them. So I'm going to have to cut the shingles a little to be able to lift them and nail underneath.
Now, getting the rest of the back done took another day, what with the flashing around the other chimneys and putting up the roof fence. Now, we've got one last detail we're working on right now. Now, putting up roof fence is all very good for letting hot air escape from under the roof, but you also want to let cool air in. And the best way to do this is with soffit vents. I'm putting in these small rectangular vents. Here's the outline of the area I need to cut out, and I've got this starter hole here that allow me to do it with a jigsaw. Now, I cut this hole so it fell exactly between the rafters because I didn't want the jigsaw to run into them. Now, I've pre-drilled so I can just screw the vent in place. Now, the best type of soffit vent is a continuous vent that runs along the length of the soffit. That's pretty tough to put in once the soffit's already been built. It's easier to do that on new construction. So I'm just putting in 2 of these small rectangular soffit vents, and that should do the trick. It's also possible to install small circular soffit vents, but you have to put a lot of these in to be effective. Check the project guide for the formulas to figure out how much ventilation your attic needs.
Over the breezeway and garage here, we just have 1 layer of shingles. So rather than tearing these up, instead we'll just re-shingle right over the top of them. And by doing this, we're able to skip a couple of preparation steps. We don't have to lay down any roofing felt, and we can skip the ice and water barrier. But we still did install some valley flashing and some drip edge over here along the rake. Now, when you're re-roofing over the top of an existing roof, you use a technique that's called nesting. What we mean by that is you take the top of the new shingle and you butt that right up against the bottom of the old shingle. To make this all work out, you have to trim some off your first shingles. Like for the starter strip here, I had to take 5 inches off the bottom and about 2 inches off the top so it would fit in the space between the bottom of the old second course and the bottom of the edge of the roof. Now, by trimming off some of the bottom and some of the top, I make sure that the adhesive strip will be right at the bottom edge to hold down the bottom of the new course of shingles here. On the first course, we also did some trimming. We cut 2 inches off along the bottom so it fit in the 10-inch space between the bottom of the old third course and the edge of the roof. The second new course is a first row you don't have to trim. For this shingle over, we use longer nails, 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches, to make sure we get through both layers of shingles and into the wood sheathing. Well, you can see that by using this technique, you always have a nice flat area to lay down your shingles on top of. Otherwise, you'd see little ridges underneath, and that's called telegraphing. Of course, this only works with shingles the exact same size and exposure of the existing shingles on the roof.
Well, that's looking good. So that first course is the only one that doesn't have a 5-inch exposure?
Yeah, it's only about 3 inches, but you'll never see that from the ground anyway.
You're just going to go with the 2 chalk lines, huh?
Well, I'm using these little slits, too, for doing some of the alignment.
Sure.
And most 3-tab shingles will have slits that land right in the middle of each tab. You can use this to position one course exactly 6 inches to the side of the row underneath it. You just lift up one side of the notch and slide the new shingle right against the side of it. Now this way, this shingle should be exactly 6 inches to the left of this shingle. In fact, this is the way most professional roofers will do it, rather than snapping a bunch of vertical chalk lines.
Here's a typical roofing situation that we didn't find on the main part of the house. This is where a roof surface runs into the side of a house. If possible, you want to install step flashing at this joint, just as it's done on the side of a chimney. On this house, the existing step flashing under the old roof can be reused. The shingles and flashing alternate layers with a piece of flashing directly underneath the lower end of every shingle.
Anytime you've got a ridge dying into a roof, you need to plan ahead a little. Cut the shingles out of the valley all the way up over the ridge. Then lay the ridge shingles over the top. Run the ridge shingles over the first course of regular shingles above the valleys, and then under the next row. You need to make sure to leave some nails out so you can lift the main shingles up and slide the ridge shingles underneath.
So what was the rate on this compressor?
Now for the compressor, a couple hoses and a couple nailers, $30 a day. I think it's $150 for the week.
We only had them for 6 days, right?
Right. Well, a week's worth of tear-off and prep, a week's worth of shingling, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, but we probably saved 40 to 50% off the cost of having a contractor do it. Now, every roofing project is going to be different, so you want to be sure and research yours thoroughly. Check out your local building codes and follow all the manufacturer's directions.
And when you're working on a project like this, think a lot about safety. And check out the project guide that was included with this tape for some helpful hints. For Home Time, I'm Dean Johnson.
And I'm Suzanne Egley. Thanks for watching.
Home Time is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The National PBS series Home Time is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right.